daughter beloved by the sea dragon, lord of the blessed sea, mistress of great Atlantis, empress of the Atlantis Empire, Terrassa Neptunos Atlantis. Everyone praises her. The sage Carton once said, "May my lady rule forever. First General Doom will always be there until his last breath." The girl stood up and asked, "Is that a subject's oath or her fiancé's?" Keortan said it was both, kissing her hand. Terrassa said her lover was very sweet, as always. Afterward, she turned to Dum and asked him what he thought. Boyfriend replied that he felt the same way about her. Terrassa said she knew that. And besides, she has no one closer than the two of them. She believed it would always be that way, until one day she, walking by, saw them fighting. Doom told the boy that he knew how he felt. Doom said he loved him so much he was willing to give his heart. Keortan hugged him and said that of course he knew. The girl was peeking at them in the meantime. She couldn't believe that her fiancé and friend were in love, and Cawthon had told her she was everything to him. She couldn't understand how these guys could betray her. At that moment she thought that maybe she had it all wrong. That thought calmed her down. After that, Dum came to the lady and told her not to forgive him. Terrassa said she hoped it was a mistake. But the traitors in front of her were indeed traitors. Doom was surprised when he realized she already knew everything, and said it would be even faster then. Corton ran up to the girl and took her hand, telling her that there was something she needed to see right now. Then the boys led the girl away, putting her in chains. She asked, "Is this what they wanted to show her?" Terrassa wondered how they could do this to her. Since she trusted them so much. She loved them with all her heart, and they betrayed her. Keortan moved closer to her and apologized to her. The girl asked, "Is that really his answer?" Keortan said he only wanted to protect the man he loved. When Terrassa heard that, she realized that she had indeed been betrayed, both by her lover and her longtime friend. She couldn't understand why this was happening or what she had gotten wrong. When she thought about it, maybe this was their original plan. Terrassa thought she would make them sorry and never forgive them for what had happened. While she still had strength, she told them to be damned forever. She has spent 1,000 years imprisoned in sadness and despair. There's no stopping her. Revenge is sure to be exacted. She figured that once she got another chance, she'd do anything for it. And at that moment, someone heard her voice, and cracks began to appear in the seal that held her. Then suddenly, when she opened her eyes, she heard the sound of rain and the smell of blood. She couldn't believe that the seal had broken. The girl who held her in her arms told Tanya not to worry. On closer inspection, she recognized it as Stella. But then suddenly she was shot. After that, a guy came up to the girl and told her to give him Princess Loessian. The girl could not understand what was happening. This was her second life, in which her name was Nicephora Loessian. Keortan's spell vanished, the chains that bound her broke, and she felt her body again. Opening her eyes, the girl thought she was back in Atlandita, but her appearance was childlike. She thought it was probably all a dream, but pinching herself hurt, and she didn't wake up. Stella whispered that she would get her to the palace safely. She would just have to be patient for a while. The girl, hearing it called her princess, was surprised. She didn't understand why that was so. At this point the man spoke up and said it was time to surrender, and if she gave the girl up, then so be it, he would let her live. Stella said what else does he even know who she is? He called her Nicephora Loessian, and told him to give her the princess. The Duchess was not comfortable saying that name. The maid told him to shut up. The guy got angry and said he was going to send her to the dustbin, and he started running at her. But the maid managed to take the knife away from him and cut him. He could not contain his pain and screamed loudly. At this point, the girl thought that this woman was clearly an unusual maid, already on edge, and her enemies only want her. In Terrassa's body, they'd be easy to kill. The former Empress's last memory was a dream of Keortan and Doom betraying her. This horrible nightmare had haunted her day after day for 1,000 years, and she could do nothing about it. Then she made the only good decision, by any means necessary to revive and take revenge on them. At that moment a warrior came running at the poor maid and shouted at her to give her up. Stella couldn't hold the girl in her arms, so she fell to the ground. She thought it didn't matter whether she was reincarnated or moved into someone else's body. Her job is to help this maid, and she has to get out of there. The girl doesn't want to just die like that. The warriors, seeing that the little girl was left unattended, shouted for her to be captured. But Nicephora was able to activate her power at that moment, and the warriors were hit with choking blobs. All the villains hit the ground, and the girl thought that if they couldn't breathe, there would be no way to attack. The maid, who was already free, looked at the girl and asked the princess if she had saved her. Stella said the young lady was special, just like the prophecy said. Nicephora thought she could only survive with her help, so she did. Stella said everyone was very worried because after the prophecy, she became a target for many. At that moment, the girl thought as if she could smell the sea. When she looked away, she couldn't believe her eyes. The maid looked up and saw a huge wave coming at them. The girls screamed with fright in one voice and said they had to run. Teresa at this point thought to make it stop. The sea felt her will. 1,000 years have passed, and she realizes that she is very happy to see, but she wishes the ocean would calm down already. And at that moment, the wave that was flying straight at the girls stopped. Stella asked, "How is that possible?" Then she looked at the girl and asked if Mistress had done it too. Nicephora thought at that moment, can she call such power her own? After all, the water was clearly following Teresa's energy. The maid said she wished that power belonged to her. She has high hopes that the lady will become a princess and her dragons as the prophecy commands. Nicephora didn't understand what she was talking about. What dragon princess? Stella said that it seemed the young mistress was tired, and it was now safe to rest. Since the little girl was still too small, she couldn't speak yet. So as she mumbled, she thought, what kind of dragon princess is this? And at that moment a picture appeared before her eyes of some man shouting, Adele, get away! After that, the girl with pink hair asks to take Nicephora to the emperor. Before handing the girl over to the maid, her mother told her to be sure to survive. Afterward, Nicephora thought at that moment, the girl's memories began to surface that she hadn't realized. Someone had killed her parents, and Stella had run away with her. Perhaps immediately after reincarnation, all this was forgotten because of the seal that had been imposed. She is Teresa, but she is also Nicephora. The girl thought it was impossible to feel comfortable in this small body. It is very cute, but it is very uncomfortable to move in it. She was the great Empress of Atlantis and turned into a crab-sized babe. But she thought that being her youngest daughter in the Duke's family wasn't so bad after all, because it was all horrible. The city she'd seen during her escape looked very familiar, as part of the empire she had built in a past life, the capital of Atlantis. So this is a country founded by two traitors who stabbed it in the back. Empress and the Duke's daughter, she did not understand who treats a noble child in such a way. But she was comforted by the thought that at least the sea was near. Keortan and Doom are traitors and traitors. She thought she would surely take revenge on them. She wasn't. At that moment, a maid came into her room. Seeing the girl in her crib, she said, "Is the princess awake already?" Taking her in her arms, she asked, "Is the young lady surprised that this is not the Duke's mansion?" The maid said it was time to eat. You need to eat a lot of food to be grown up and strong. Nicephora thought it would be nice to grow up soon and exact her revenge. She must find out what spell Keortan used on her. The girl murmured to have her food brought to her already. Stella, hearing this, said she was whispering so sweetly. Nicephora shook her head, saying she wasn't mumbling. On the maid seeing this, she said she was so wonderful at turning her head, it was impossible to look at her. The maid took the girl and said that if Mrs. Ninnis could see her, she would be so happy. But then suddenly, looking at the time, Stella said her brothers would be back soon and put the girl back in bed. Stella said she heard that they had finished the battle with the Yorsu pirates, perhaps when they arrive. But then suddenly the girl stopped listening to the maid and felt the strong spirit of the sea dragon. She couldn't understand where such power came from. They weren't even in Atlantis. That's when the emperor walked in. Nicephora looked at the man who had entered and recognized who it was. When she saw his face, she knew it was Keortan. But as she looked closer, she realized it wasn't him, and the girl wondered who this stranger was. The maid bowed and greeted the emperor. The man asked, "Is this little girl the last one or the victim?" and looked at the little girl. He said she looked a lot like her mother and asked if anyone had seen the passing of her parents. Stella said she managed to escape and hide the mistress, but no one knows exactly what happened to the ducal couple. Emperor asked, "Are the prophecies really just a joke to them?" He became angry and said that they were all insignificant creatures. At that moment some black smoke came out of it, and the girl realized she couldn't breathe. After calming down, the emperor told the maid that as soon as the young lords returned, let them pick a day and hold the funeral. She could take part in it too. Stella thanked the emperor for that. The man then said that the child was a precious creature. Perhaps she would cure the madness of the young dragons, so she should take care of her. The girl couldn't understand why everyone was calling her a victim, and realized that she wasn't an all-powerful healer, though. Then she thought it was a good thing the Emperor had 3 options to choose from, then realized she had counted out of herself. That leaves 2 then. Nicephora thought of boiling a medicine of prickly sea urchin and seaweed when she was insane, and then drinking it. She didn't understand why healthy people would be caught. When she looked at the Emperor, she thought that he looked exactly like Kaortan, but the character was completely opposite. At this point the girl screamed, trying to say who he even was, but she was still a toddler, so she just made sounds. The Emperor leaned toward her and asked, "Does she wonder who he is?" Nicephora thought that of course she wondered. When the man explained that he was an old friend of her father, Karzan Loessian, as well as her mother, Ninnis Loessian. He is also the Emperor of the Kaortan state. His name is Agrio Run Kaortan. At that moment, the girl thought that the idiot had named the country after himself. If he was so eager for the throne, she would gladly give him the power. Taking a closer look at him, she realized that in that case, this man was a descendant of Kaortan. Doom had such deep feelings, and he has a child with another woman. At this moment, the Emperor took the girl in his arms and said that he would support her a little. Nicephora immediately realized what was happening, but she screamed, trying to break free because she was in pain. The Emperor asked what was wrong with her. The servants answered nothing but simply bowed. The girl thought how incomprehensible it was to him. He squeezed it so hard he can't even control it, and he's squeezing it really hard. Emperor said the girl had already eaten, and there were lots of toys around. He suggested maybe a diaper change was needed. Or should I say, get rid of the extra weight, he said. And then he laughed out loud. Nicephora looked at him, and he told her not to be so serious. She's so cute and funny and reacts like she knows what he's talking about. Then suddenly one of the workers came up to the Emperor and said that the lady was too young to socialize. The Emperor looked at him angrily and told him to continue. The worker apologized and said he had committed a capital offense, but Agrio asked why he was afraid. If he started talking, let him finish. But the man answered nothing. Then the Emperor went over to the bed and put the little girl back in, saying that, and that was that. He asked, "I scare you too, don't I?" Corda looked at him. Then he asked, "Does that mean no?" Nicephora thought, maybe he'll lay off already why he's so clingy, and made a disgruntled face. The Emperor laughed and said that he understood everything, nothing scary at all. Then he turned away and said, "Then we could try this." The girl wondered what he was talking about. At this moment, the Emperor turned around and tried to make an intimidating face while shouting, "Boo!" Nicephora wondered what she had just seen and why she had suffered so much. Walking home, the Emperor recalled a moment from the past as a friend approached him. He asked that Agrio, should they suddenly leave their child too soon, take care of him. To keep her safe, they asked that he help Nicephora break the Imperial family curse. Agrio thought that once again there was nothing he could do. His sister's death, both of them. He couldn't protect anyone. He asked his assistant what this child was doing now, in the victim's offense. He replied that she was sleeping peacefully, and no one was following her anymore. Everything, whether this girl was really a dragon princess, if she turned out to be. But the Emperor interrupted him and told him to be quiet. Agrio said he could see that the man didn't value his life too much. The ruler of the Kaortan Empire has been under a curse for 1,000 years. He is tormented by hallucinations that awaken unbridled anger. His entire body twisted and torn, unbearable pain, madness, and it is passed on to all subsequent emperors. So the former ruler decided to perform a sacrifice. Duke Loessian's family died that day. The ancestor of their family was the dragon princess who cured the first emperor of insanity. The will she left before her death reads, "In the distant future, a new dragon princess will be born into the Loessian family. Only then will the sins of the emperor of the Kaortan country be forgiven." So say the legends of the empire. They're waiting for the child from the prophecy. And when Loessian has the child, they want to lock her up in a castle. When they are sacrificed, then the crown prince's madness will end. Well, now this child was in his hands after all that had happened. Agrio didn't know if he could get rid of the sin. Because if she really is a dragon princess, the day the heir turns 19, it would save them all from the curse. Taking the girl in his arms then, he didn't understand how such a small, fragile creature could be killed. The girl was very nice, and he liked her. He couldn't look at her chubby cheeks, eyes that were full of irritation, and those tiny lips. The Emperor thought at that moment that her charms should be known to the whole world, but he had no way of knowing why she wasn't smiling. Tried to scare her, then thought it must make the kids laugh. At least that's what he'd read in the book. When he looked at the girl's chilling stare, he thought that the author must be a fraud and should be captured. The girl, hearing this, thought how could he even use his authority like that? Agrio leaned over and asked what he had to do for her to smile. Emperor said he could see some desire in that look. He said that if she smiled, he would arrange the room beautifully and also ennoble the maid. When the girl heard this, she thought she didn't need such a thing. Well, after looking at the maid who was begging for it, she thought she would do it just for Stella and thought, oh, those Cohortans. In that life, Keortan had told her to smile in order to contain her anger. If she did, the whole world would bow its head to her. The girl thought she would have to do it after all. She smiled and said, "Pa." When the emperor heard this, he asked what she had just said because he couldn't believe it. The workers said that she had said, "Daddy." Someone even said that the young lady thought he was her father. Nicephora couldn't understand what was going on because it wasn't true. Agrio told the girl that when she smiles, she becomes even more like her mother. He then handed her a toy turtle and told her that when a child is born into the Courtant family, they give him a plush turtle. It signifies longevity. The girl took the toy and thought, he put her in the abode for victims and wishes her longevity. That didn't suit her at all. The emperor stroked the girl's head and told her to treasure it. That way he could at least see her parents in it. After that, the emperor walked out the door. As soon as the door closed, one of the workers ran up to him and wanted to say something to him. But Agrio asked that they speak more quietly because he had a headache, and he himself thought that madness was awakening. He began to hear some voices telling him to kill, to crush everyone, to wring their necks. The workers came up to him and asked him if he was all right. He replied that he had to escort the emperor to the palace. The man looked at all those cheerful faces and said he already knew they were all Roxborough spies. He said they were specially chosen and brought here, and they have no idea about it. One of them wanted to say that it was a misunderstanding, but the emperor interrupted him and said that he had made sure that the child was all right. Now the executioner must be summoned. He said that madness was near and they would become worthy of sacrifice. Some of the workers started talking at each other that they were the spies. Before he could utter the words to the end, his guards ran up and killed them all, covering his cheek with blood. The emperor thought that Ninnis could care less. He would protect the girl until the very end. At this time in her room, Stella said that Mistress is incredible. She already understands everything and doesn't even cry. I guess the blood of the family takes its toll. The girl thought that, of course, she knows what will happen if she cries in front of this emperor, doesn't she? The maid said that perhaps she was even more talented than the young gentleman. Nicephora asked, "What am I?" Stella explained that they are both incredibly active, but she is the first to show her abilities at such an early age. She thinks the young lords will realize how special she is. The maid saw the girl yawn, then immediately asked, "Are you tired? I think it is time for you to go to bed." Nicephora thought at this point that she wondered what it would be like to have brothers, because she had never had any. She wondered what sort of people these two would turn out to be. And Stella, at that moment, tried to pin the girl down. The girl felt very sleepy, but thought that there was still so much to learn. Eventually her eyes closed. When evening came, there were a couple of guys standing nearby hiding-eye the little girl. One of them said that this little one had really been born so fearless. The second guy told him not to touch her, or he would hurt her. The first guy was surprised and asked if he thought he was a criminal, because he knew how to treat children. Nicephora began to hear some noise, and because of that she woke up. When the boys saw that the girl had opened her eyes, one of them said that they had woken her up after all. Nicephora, seeing some guys staring at her intently, wondered who they were, but after looking closer, I realized that the pink-haired one was Nathaniel Lozian, and the one with blonde hair was Heiberg Lozian. The girl thought they were the same brothers who had returned from the battlefields holding victory. She thought they really looked like her. Without saying anything for his brother to look at her looking at them like that, he thought she must be curious. The boy speculated that she might be sensing their energy. Heiberg. That it's entirely possible, judging by how great her natural strength is. The girl was surprised to hear this. She couldn't believe that they had noticed Tarasa's will inside her. She wanted them to look at her and tell her more. Guybert couldn't understand what she was saying. His brother assumed she was spreading her hands like that and probably wanted to play with them. When the girl shook her head, Nathaniel assumed she probably wanted to say, "little brother." Guy said that on the ship he had read some books on raising children at that age. They might as well say the word "little brother." The little girl thought none of this was true, but Nathaniel leaned over to her crib and asked her to say the word baby brother to him. When the girl remained silent, he said that it was probably too soon. Gibberk answered his brother that she would develop very quickly, and it wouldn't take long, because their sister is also from the blood of the coral fairies after all. When Nicephora heard this, she was surprised. Coral fairies. They were the strongest fighting race in the ocean, never avoiding wars and never losing. Were born with a strong fighting spirit and showed their skills in battle from a young age. But many of them were also unusually beautiful, and so people ruthlessly took them captive. Nicephora thought that her mother had been able to resist the assassins because the heritage of the race lived in her. Heiberg explained that coral fairies that went through a period of development became the strongest beings in the world, but he had heard that they grow very slowly until their first birthday. The same goes for half-breeds. Perhaps Nicephora will be stronger than they are, and even stronger than Mom. When Gibberk said about his mom, there was an awkward silence. After a while, Daniel said he still couldn't believe it. Mom was so powerful. Who could have attacked them? But Gibberk didn't know that. Then Nathaniel asked why they had been attacked. Asked his brother to answer. I mean, he's smart. Gibberk said there was no way his brain could understand it. The Loessian family has so many enemies that they can't be counted. Besides, the prophecy was voiced. It was a ploy of those who jumped to conclusions. Nathaniel asked, "He's talking about that prophecy that said this girl would become a dragon princess." At that moment, Nicephora thought she remembered hearing Stella and the Emperor talking. She was surprised that what they were discussing had been said about her. Nathaniel said he had memorized all these prophecies, but didn't quite understand their meaning. Gibberk said he was sure that the first 5 priests of the Church of Lamotte had received the same predictions. The girl wanted to ask then what they meant, those words about the dragon princess, but she only managed to make a few sounds. Gibberk took her hand and asked her wonderingly too. The girl mumbled something that meant naturally. Then Nathaniel asked if his sister thought she understood all their words. The brother replied that he didn't know, but she was Loessian, so anything was possible. Afterward, Heiberg said the prophecy about his brother sounded like this. When the promised time came, the rift opened at the end of the long sacrifice. The purest power blossomed. The daughter of the seas will bless the young dragon, and he will finally rest in peace. Worship. There will be unimaginable prosperity, which hitherto we dared not dream of. Pray. Where will the tip of the blade go? Ask forgiveness for mercy, but the pain of repentance will remain unchanged. A place where scarlet soil rises. A land where silence falls asleep in fear. It is right to take us back to where we came from, because that is your salvation. When the girl heard all these words, she wondered if the daughter of the seas could be talking about her. Nicephora thought she should ponder this. The end of the long sacrifices clearly meant the Loessian family. The purest power. Of course we're talking about the power of the oceans, and also the daughter of the sea. Who is it if not her? Nicephora Loessianus and Empress Terrassa Neptunos Atlantis. The girl can't understand why it seems to her that the prophecy is about Terras, as if she knew in advance when she would be reincarnated. She thought it very strange that the Lamat church, which worships the earth god, needed her forgiveness. At that moment, Nathaniel came up behind her and took her in his arms. He started turning it over. And then he said that no matter how much he looked, he couldn't find the mark, and asked how he knew it could be the right one. Heiberg said they only had to wait for the sister to awaken. The shaking made the girl dizzy. So he took her into his arms and told her that after becoming a dragon princess, Nicephora would have to recite an oath with the prince, and the curse would disappear. He said that was the story of the legend. Nathaniel was surprised and said that the crown prince was only 5 years old. Then he began to count 19 minus 5. And at that moment he wondered, Nicephora, that it would be 14. When the boy had finished counting, he asked, "What will happen to them if in these 14 years the sister manages to awaken?" Gibberk, putting the girl back in the bed, said they would leave here. He said that if the curse is broken, then sacrifices won't be necessary. Daniel said that was a very good thing, because frankly, he didn't want to die. He asked, and why was she born in their generation specifically? The dragon princess hasn't appeared for a very long time. Everyone's hands were down. He said to the girl, "Thank you very much, Fofo. Until then, we will be your guards." At that moment, the girl thought that they must be very much afraid of death too. After all, they are only children. They've already lost their parents, just like her. Even when her consciousness shuts down, Nisephora's body's memory of her parents remains. She remembers how affectionate her father was, and how fiercely her mother fought to save her. At that moment, the girl's tears flowed. She didn't understand why she was crying. She had lived more than 1,000 years, and she was still so small. When Nathaniel saw that the girl had already gone to bed and asked, "Is it really time already?" Her brother told them not to disturb her and to go already. Daniel said he would like to play with Fofo some more, but told his sister that they would see each other tomorrow. Let her wait. He will bring her a very interesting toy. As the door slammed shut, the girl wondered when they were coming. Nisephora thought she wouldn't mind, because it wouldn't be boring with them. She thought she liked having brothers, and with these thoughts she fell asleep. Nathaniel came to her again a few days later and told her to see what he had brought her today. The brothers began to visit the girl every day. In the meantime, she began to speak a little, and one of them even called her Fofo. When Nathaniel brought her another toy, she thought she wanted to see the sea, not play these childish games. When the guy wanted to kiss her, the girl kicked him right in the face and thought she didn't want it. Nisephora then began pointing her finger toward the window and asked that they go there. When Nathaniel saw this, he said that if that's how she wanted to look outside, he would help her. Afterward, he took her in his arms and carried her to the window and asked her if the sea was beautiful. Nisephora saw the ocean and thought it was her homeland, her most favorite place. The girl really wants to dive and swim with the whales like she used to, as well as sing with the mermaids. She remembered those times so well, napping on the backs of turtles. And she thought, she probably can't go back to her old life. Nisephora started to pull out of the boy's arms and thought she wanted to go in the water. Said she couldn't, and it was too dangerous. When he deposited her on the couch, the girl thought Stella would have taken her, but she said she was off to help with her parents' funeral arrangements. Because of this body, she can't do anything at all. Then suddenly, when she looked around, she saw her brother reading a book called The Origin of the Legend and Oath of the Dragon Princess. Then she turned and asked him to give it to her. Gibberk asked if she wanted it. The girl said yes, and he handed her the book. But when she almost had it, he held it up and said he wouldn't give it to her. Nisephora cried out and asked why. Gibberk said that if she wanted to look so badly, let her kiss him on the cheek. He said a parenting book says that through physical contact with parents, children feel love and form an emotional bond. And since their parents were dead, he would have to take their place. He told the girl he could just take the book back. Nisephora was very angry and wondered if he thought she would fall for such a thing. A kiss on the cheek from the Empress of Great Atlantis. Gibberk took her in his arms and told her that if she wanted something, she should at least give something in return. Nisephora thought that she must not listen to him, because otherwise her authority would be invalidated. But when she saw the book, she let her guard down, and her lips reached for his cheek. When she did, Gibberk said, "This is what parents feel like." He said it was unbelievable. The girl screamed at this point and thought, "Stop talking this nonsense. She needs a book." The brother had no choice but to give the girl the book after all. As she lay in her bed, there was a guy named Theo sitting on the chandelier. By order of the Emperor, he serves as the secret guard of the Dragon Princess. His job is to protect the mistress from assassins. As a bodyguard, he is not allowed to talk to the young lady or let it be known that he knows her. But as he watched the little girl sweetly reading that book, he thought he really wanted to say hello to her. Just once. She had a very cute little nose and lovely hair and chubby legs. He thought she was very cute and pretty. Theo was very surprised because, as far as he knows, children that age don't read books. When the girl got her book, and she thought the Emperor had kept his promise, she didn't think he'd even put a bodyguard. But the girl thought she needed to concentrate on the contents of the book, so she began to read. First Emperor Kaortan was one of the surviving apostles of the ancient Empire of Atlantis. The thriving Atlantis, the source of culture, disappeared under the sea. Only 2 apostles managed to escape. Kaortan founded the country using technology he took from the Sea Dragon Temple, and in return, he brought a terrible curse upon himself. The Dragon Princess was the one who cured the first emperor of his madness. She's an ancestor of the Losian family. Before she died, the princess left a will that the heir to her power would save the Kaortan family. And now the next Dragon Princess, upon awakening, must join the Crown Prince in taking the oath. Nisephora was shocked when she read this. She couldn't understand how Atlantis had gone underwater. Her kingdom was submerged in water every 10 years, and then came back out again. Though land and ocean were separated, All inhabitants were close to the sea and could breathe underwater. The girl couldn't believe that now she was being told in a book that Atlantis had sunk. The curse also seems increasingly strange to her, as if created artificially. The oath, following the predicted rules, must be taken at the central temple of Lamat. But this is only possible after the dragon princess reaches the age of 15. Nicephora thought that even the law for breaking the curse was clearly forged. There was no way she could figure out what the reason was, what kind of sea dragon spoilage it was. The symptoms of insanity are described in this book. Muscles and joints throughout the body collapse, and the pain of twisting insides makes it impossible to breathe. People are overcome by hallucinations. They hear the voice of a young girl, her words of curses, pain, and resentment. The voice of this unhappy woman is always the same, as is what she utters. At this point, the girl closed the book and thought that if I continue, I myself will go crazy from the mere meanings. It's getting sad, Nicephora thought, just have to make it to 15, from which it would be easy to break the curse and run away. The girl hoped she wouldn't have to marry the crown prince. She exhaled and thought that she wanted to grow up soon. At this point, Stella the maid thanked the others for helping her with the funeral arrangements. The maid had not yet been introduced to the victim, but, she said, and at that moment she came into the room and saw that the girl was very tired and asleep. She told the maids to clean up quickly and leave so as not to wake the girl. When Stella came over and covered Nicephora, she woke up and thought Stella had come, but then realized it didn't matter, and she really wanted to sleep. But then suddenly in the middle of the night, she heard someone's voice, as if someone was crying and asking for help. The girl woke up and realized that this voice seemed very familiar to her. She didn't understand how to help her, so she asked the one who spoke, and she could hear her. The voice said she was in a lot of pain, as if her whole body was tearing. Nicephora couldn't understand what to do, how she could help her. At that moment, the girl saw something like a person in front of her. She could not understand whether it was an illusion or reality. The little boy was crying and begging for help. He wanted to be rescued. Nicephora could do nothing, and after a few seconds it was all gone. She didn't understand how it had happened. The girl wondered who this guy was and why he had come to her. The next day when Nicephora awoke, she was still wondering what had happened during the night. She supposed it might have been an illusion, but then she thought he looked too exhausted, and it felt like reality. She wondered if they would ever meet again. At that moment Stella came up to the girl and said that she might as well know it, but today was the funeral of the Duke and Duchess. We still don't know who attacked Loessian's family, so she could be in danger. That's why you need to dress more carefully than usual. She asked what the girl thought about it. Nicephora couldn't understand what the maid meant. What other safe clothes? Stella said it would be windy near the beach, and she should wear a warm coat and a morning dress underneath. After that, she brought out a small armored vest and said that you should use armor to protect yourself from attack, and she had one too. Nicephora thought that an ordinary maid wouldn't bring armor to defend herself against assassins, and Stella's personality was becoming more and more interesting to her. Atlantis, the country of Tarasa, always towered above the rest, for the Atlanteans once came out of the sea, and after death they returned there. She thought it was the same in the human world, from funeral clothes to customs. Nicephora thought it all looked very much like her own home. Suddenly the priest spoke and said that today they were mourning the heads of the Loessian family, the defenders of Caortan. It's a great fortune that the heirs of the ducal cheetah stayed with them. The sea god's blessing is still here. He said they pray for good fortune for the young lords and ladies, that sorrow may never again overtake them. After this, they went out into the courtyard to the boats, which had been prepared in advance, and the priest said that now it was time to say goodbye to the Loessian couple. As the boats sailed away, Nathaniel said in a weeping voice that they had promised that they would go traveling together. Why didn't they keep their promise? He didn't understand why. He thought he should have held out for them until he arrived. He would save them. He could. But at that moment, he cried. Nicephora thought at that moment that she too had people she would call mom and dad, but it all came crashing down. She would not forgive them, and she would avenge them. And for that she needs to strengthen her magic, absorb as much of the sea's energy as she can, because there's no telling when else she'll get out. But she didn't realize when she inhaled, she thought there was sand mixed in. At that moment her nose itched badly. She couldn't help herself and sneezed very hard so that all the guests who were standing around heard. She thought it tickled her nose so much that she couldn't calculate the force, so loud it got. At that moment, she heard the guests whispering. One of them said that the death of the couple must have angered the heavens, and this was the aura of destruction. Another asked what was going to happen to Loessian's family now, if they were going to collapse if this girl wasn't a dragon princess. Nicephora heard this, and thought they should watch the kebab, because there were children here. At that moment, she wondered how to silence them. Maybe she could chop each of them into pieces, but then she remembered something she'd said in the past, when Kaortan said to make her smile and that you can't kill people just because they aren't courteous. At that moment, she remembered that the Emperor liked her smile too, and decided it was worth a try. When one of the guests said that he didn't understand what gave strength to the Loessian family, he immediately shut up when he saw the girl's cute smile. Nicephora forced herself to smile and thought to make all the idiots shut up finally. Afterward there was a wake. All the guests gathered in the banquet hall and everyone was talking about something. Nicephora was put into a carriage, and when the girls who were passing by noticed her, they said that the young princess was so serious and sweet, and did not even cry. At this point she thought, everyone thinks she's cute, so it's all going according to plan. Suddenly one of the guests asked if the emperor was planning to find a consort. Nicephora, hearing this, was surprised that he had no wife. Another Kostya suggested that maybe it was because of madness. He must be afraid that the empress would be hurt. The girl said that was what was troubling her, the crown prince, that is. But at that moment they moved away from the girl, and she heard nothing more. Nicephora remembered her hearing range ability, and made it to the entire banquet hall. A guest said that he was so weak that he couldn't even show his face here. Another replied that she thought it was obligatory for the heir to go out in public. The girl could hear everything now. "I'm worried about his increasing cruelty," they cooed. "They say he killed all the maids the other day." She said the prince was covered in blood and held a sword in his hand. "Who wouldn't be scared?" she added. Another girl asked if madness could be the cause of this. "Rumor has it that he cries in pain every day," another guest shared. Nicephora thought, is that boy really the prince? Well, after all, the emperor's son is only 5 years old, and the child in charge looked all of 7, she thought. And besides, he didn't seem the type to kill maids. The girl thought she should find out for herself. He calls her all the time, but this time she decided to call him first. She thought that if he could hear her, he should answer. She asked if he was the very crown prince from the rumors. At that moment, a picture of a little boy asking for help appeared in front of the girl. Looking at him, she thought, is he really her future husband? At that time, the emperor was gathering in his room. A worker came in and told him that the memorial ceremony had already begun. The emperor replied that he would come soon, and asked where the crown prince was now. The man replied that they had just arrived with the crown prince. The emperor said that was good, and that he was only curious. The man asked, does he really think that the murderer of the duke and his wife is their doing? Agrio said that at least he was sure that another country had attacked Kaortan. The awakening of the dragon princess will bring prosperity to the empire. That is exactly what the enemies fear, the emperor said. Their kingdom is the second most powerful after Kaortan, so Roxborough are the main culprits. The emperor asked how the investigation was going. Guy replied that they had checked 3 assassin guilds within the empire, and no evidence had been found in any of them. Emperor said it was very good, and that if any were found, he would have beheaded the Prince of Roxborough on the spot. After saying his thoughts, he turned to leave and said they could go already and look at the face of this idiot. At that moment, Nicephora saw the boy and asked him if he had hurt himself like that. She said he must have been in a lot of pain. When she wanted to say something else, she heard strange trumpet sounds. The boy started talking again to get help, and in that moment she found herself back in the wake, thinking that there was so much more she wanted to say. But she was back again. Just then, a friend spoke in someone's voice who said that His Majesty the Emperor had arrived. Agrio thanked everyone present, and he said that some say that a distinguished guest has come from distant places, and he wishes to honor the supporters of Kaortan and his dear friends. The Emperor told the man to come forward and say hello. The girl became very curious as to who it was that came there, so she began to signal to the maid to take her in her arms. Stella took her in her arms, and Nicephora began to stare intently in the Emperor's direction, waiting for a new guest. At that moment, a guy came up to Agrio and said that he was Gunther Zen Roxborough, the prince, and greeted the emperor. Agrio said he was good for showing up here. The boy replied that he was honored. The emperor said that how does one know if he had come to pay his respects, or to make sure that they were really dead? The girl was surprised to hear this, and Gunther said no way. It was a great loss to his majesty. The boy said he had merely come to share the pain of the duke's children, who had lost both parents at such a young age. Emperor said he spoke so freely about it in front of him. He said it was commendable. Gunther thanked him for this, and told him that he had brought gifts for their family, and asked that they accept them. Nicephora thought that apparently Roxborough was an enemy of Kyortan, but what the emperor said was out of line. She wondered if he suspected the leaders of this country of killing her parents, and if the kingdom of Roxborough was really to blame. Nicephora thought that if this was really true, she would not forgive them, and diplomatic or political, she would crush them like bugs. Stella, seeing the girl's face, asked what was wrong. Maybe she was hungry or needed her diaper changed. But at that moment, Gunther came up to them and asked if it was the little girl, the one because of the rumors. The girl thought at that moment that she had seen him somewhere before. The guy had a shameless look, ignoring Atlantis' authority, looking like he didn't care about anything, also snapping at him. Nicephora thought, how dare he raise his insolent eyes to her? He's 1,000 years away from her. As the girl began to approach him, Stella whispered to her to be careful with him. At that moment, the little girl thought that there was no way she was going to back down. Gunther said that it was very strange how much he didn't see anything special in her, and what that prophecy was about, he didn't understand. Even up close, she's just an ordinary child. But at that moment, the girl raised her hand and slapped him in the face. Stella was shocked, as was everyone around her who saw this. The girl at that moment thought that he was letting himself go too much. Gunther got to his feet and shouted, "What a little brat!" But at that moment, Nicephora slapped him on the cheek again, and she thought of the blow he'd gotten from the baby. Gunther raised his hand at her and shouted that he was going to give it to her now. But the girl turned her back to the maid and shouted to the whole hall. Stella asked what the prince allows himself. How dare he threaten a baby who can do nothing? At that moment the girl thought that the maid had done well. After the incident, Nicephora's brothers came up to them. He asked the boy what he was doing, and how he had dared to touch his little sister. Gunther shouted that she had hit him first, but the man asked if a child could do that on purpose. Afterward, Nathaniel asked the boy how he even dared to touch the infant. At this moment, the girl thought to have him go train and then already come over. After that, she smiled evilly. The emperor, as he left the hall, thought that she was such an extraordinary child. She was able to overpower this insolent man. The helpers who followed him said that the lady hit him so hard that you could hear her little hand make that sound. Agrio said she was such a cutie, and if it was possible to turn back time, he'd look at it again. Someone on his staff said it was the first time the emperor had smiled so brightly since the death of the previous emperor. Agrio asked if it was true, and he thought to himself that after losing his precious sister, he had also lost his best friends Karzin and Ninnis, and now he has only two people to protect: the crown prince, who is his sister's child, and Nicephora, the child of Karzin and Ninnis. Thinking about it, the emperor asked how the maids were being prepared to send the victims to the castle. The servant replied that it was very carefully selected, so maybe he wasn't worried. He asked if all was well at the castle now, and requested that he bring him a new report. But the worker remained silent, and then the emperor asked if something was wrong with him. The man explained that mistress dances with her ass when she is in a good mood. Agrio was very surprised by this news. He said it should definitely be recorded, and let them keep the whole thing a secret. When evening came, Nicephora remembered a passage from her past. Kyorthan had said that when she stared like that, he couldn't concentrate. Terasa apologized and said he had such a beautiful smile, wished she could take it like that. And at that moment, she took his hand. Kyorthan replied that she couldn't just ask for forgiveness. The girl laughed and said that he was right as always. When Terasa was captive, she couldn't understand all the time why they betrayed her, why she cursed them, but she still misses them, even in her dreams. Nicephora, lying in her bed, thought that she missed her country Atlantis very much, and must find out what had happened to her and why Kyortan had betrayed her. But to do that, she would have to go to the secret library. But she didn't know how to get there. With these thoughts, the girl fell asleep. The next morning, 3 new maids named Nilla, Vovoki, and Meryl came to Nicephora. They said they would take care of their mistress. Nilla said she had brought her a present and didn't know if she would like it. It was a walker. The girl told her to give it to her. When Nicephora was put in them, she was very happy about it, and thought that at last she would be able to escape. With these thoughts, the girl ran closer to the window, closer to the sea. But then suddenly she heard that voice again. He was asking for help and saying he was in a lot of pain. The girl was surprised and wondered if he was in pain again. And at that moment she saw him in front of her, lying on the floor. She moved closer to him and told him not to get sick and she would find him. When the girl looked at his face, she saw some letters on his forehead. She thought it might be the language of Atlantis, and that's when she woke up, lying on the bed. Nicephora thought perhaps it was time travel, but there were other letters, and when she looked beside her, she saw the crown prince lying on the bed. When she first looked at him, she thought he was dead. But the girl crawled closer and touched his cheek. She was warm, so she was relieved that he was alive. But when she looked closer at his hair, she noticed he had dragon horns. She couldn't believe he was a half-breed. At that moment, Nicephora looked around and she was surprised that there was no one here. This child was very sick, and there were no adults around. After that, she looked at him again, and thought he didn't look 5 years old after all. Nicephora couldn't understand why he was so beautiful even now, even gorgeous. Nathaniel and Heiberg are beautiful too, but there's no comparison. Nicephora thought he looked like he wanted to be protected. This guy was clearly her type. Then she saw the rag that was lying next to him, and decided to put it on his forehead, thinking that this wonderful boy needed care and help. But at that moment the guy started to open his eyes and wake up. When he saw the girl, he was really scared. At that moment, the little girl thought she had been watching out for him, and he looked like an early Navy SEAL. She wanted to tell him not to be sick, but she failed. Only mumbled something. The prince replied that he didn't understand a word she said and asked where she came from. But at that moment he was squirming, and the girl thought that perhaps he was in pain from the madness. There was definitely another way to ease the plight of the damned in the book. Thinking about it, Nicephora remembered it resonated. Until the oath is made with resonance, she'll be able to subdue the prince's curse, but she doesn't know how to make it really hurt. At that moment, the boy reached for her with his hand. He pulled her close to him and hugged her. The girl thought she couldn't breathe. After a while, she managed to get out and used her powers. The boy woke up and looked at the girl, then closed his eyes again and sighed heavily. Nicephora couldn't understand why he wasn't asking for help like before at this point. She thought maybe she saw his thoughts. This guy is very stubborn, but she likes him. So the girl hugged him. The next day when she woke up, someone said hello to her. At this moment, the girl felt the aura of the sea dragon. She looked to the side and saw the guy. Looking at him, she thought that he was insanely strong after all. And in her past life at this age, she had the same energy, but only there was an aura coming from him, as if he was hated by the entire ocean. So she decided to walk up to him and get some power. When she sat down next to him, she started to take some from him. The guy thought it was pretty amazing. He looks at her and his soul becomes lighter and his pain lessens. The prince turned to the girl and asked, "Is she really the dragon princess?" Nicephora nodded approvingly. He asked if she remembered how they resonated yesterday. The boy said that the older she was, the stronger the resonance would become, and thanked her. He said that thanks to her he could breathe now. And at that moment he looked at the girl, whose stomach rumbled. When he heard this, he asked if she was hungry and said she probably needed milk. Nicephora told him no. And I thought to myself, she's really sick of this milk. She wants fried steak or shrimp and butter, or at least baby food if she can't have any other. At this point, the prince laughed loudly, apologizing, saying that he just heard everything. When he asked if she wanted baby food, the girl was very surprised when he said he had heard. He said that apparently when she thinks about something loudly, her words are transmitted to him. The girl was very surprised by this. At that moment, a worker came into their room and asked if the prince had summoned him. But when he looked at him, he was very much surprised and asked, "Is it really Princess Loisian?" The boy told him to go and get him something to eat and to get something for the baby. The worker said he would do everything and left. The boy turned to the girl at this point and said he wondered what her name was. "We should call someone who knows." Nicephora mumbled something, wanting to say that she could answer everything herself. The prince said it was a disaster and that he didn't want to give her away. The boy didn't understand what he should do now. The girl at this point thought to make him stop because he wouldn't be able to take care of her, and she thought that she could say her name herself. and at that moment, water came out of the kettle and whispered her name. The prince, hearing this, said that he was glad to meet her, and also that his name was Sion. At that moment the girl thought that he would also do such a trick with his eyes closed, and it probably did not surprise him. But as she looked at the boy, she wondered if he was exactly 5 years old, because he looked much older. And if you look closely, he doesn't look like an emperor at all. The boy, hearing her thoughts, said he was really 5 years old. Nicephora was surprised and wondered if he had heard her again, but the prince replied that he knew it from the look in her eyes. Members of the Imperial family grow up faster than other children, and he's the son of the previous emperor. The current emperor is his mom's younger brother. Nicephora looked at the boy and asked why he was looking at her like that. But all she got out, as always, were sounds. Sion understood her question, and said that she was looking at her because she was cute. She understands everything that is going on around her, but she can't talk. At that moment the girl thought, does he really want to melt her heart with his looks? Nicephora thought so, and decided she wouldn't mind marrying him since the curse and just divorce him. And besides, she felt sorry to leave him in such agony. At that moment she stroked his cheek, but then suddenly Stella and Nathaniel came running into the room. When they saw them, they were very surprised. Nathaniel saw his sister, and asked if she even realized how worried he was. Suddenly he saw the prince nearby as well and said hello, and afterward bade farewell to another maid who came in and asked if he had asked to bring food, along with that to invite people over. The maid fell to the floor and said that she had only brought food and asked that she not be killed. Nicephora was surprised at her reaction and thought, is that something you could kill for? She wants to get this tense situation diffused quickly because she can smell good roasted meat coming from there. The girl screamed, thinking that she is hungry like a wolf. She wants to be given food and not have the prince kill this maid. At that moment, Nathaniel ran up to his sister and asked her what was wrong. Something was hurting her. The girl kept screaming, thinking that those who gave her goodies were good people. Sion, hearing her thoughts, told the maid she could leave. The maid bowed and thanked them. After that, the prince began to feed the girl. Nicephora said it was delicious and asked for more. But suddenly Nathaniel spoke. He turned to the prince and asked if he could take his sister away after he had fed her. They were very worried about the girl. Nicephora thought it was no surprise. After all, she had suddenly disappeared. But she didn't want to leave Sion alone. At this point, the prince said he was refusing because she didn't want to be in the offering palace, but here at his place. Then he turned to the girl and asked if he was right. Nicephora thought that he had been alone all the time, and though he looked perfectly healthy. In fact, he was struggling with himself and agonizing, and even now he can barely stand on his feet. Sion told the girl that he would give her anything she wanted, so he asked that she stay with him. Nicephora at that moment mentally apologized to Nathaniel, and thought that there was no way she could leave him. After a while, the prince took the girl in his arms and went out into the corridor. When the staff saw this, they began to say that the child and the crown prince were not suitable for each other. At this point, the girl thought she was hearing all of this, and didn't understand why Sion was silent. You're not reacting. The maid asked what would happen if the prince harmed the duke's daughter. The second man said that apparently she would soon become an offering for him. Nicephora didn't understand how this was possible. After all, he could hear it all. Then the boy stopped and turned to Joseph, who was standing nearby. Sion asked for that man to be led away. His punishment was 30 strokes of the whip and dismissal. And at that moment, the guards appeared and began to take the laborer away. The boy began to ask His Majesty not to kill him because he was wrong. Afterward, the prince and the girl went outside and got into a carriage. Sion asked if she thought he had overdone it. Nicephora said not at all, because it was deserved. The boy said he wouldn't have paid attention if the man had only talked about him. But he wouldn't forgive someone who would involve a girl in dirty rumors. Nicephora thought he was good and did the right thing because that guy forgot his place. So he should be punished for it. Sion said it was so amazing. When the girl asked what it was, he explained that she was just a little girl, but she seems to be as big as he is. He wondered if she might have some other appearance he didn't know about. Nicephora got nervous and thought maybe he sensed something, some power from the ocean, for example. The guy said that she was from the Loesian family, so anything was possible. The girl exhaled and realized that he must have just asked. At that moment he took her hand and kissed it, thanking her for not being afraid of him. I wish she would grow up and learn to talk. Nicephora wondered, and wondered what it was with him. His breathing is very stymied, and his body is slowly becoming cold. Then she realized that these were symptoms. At this point she felt a strong burning sensation. Her cheeks began to itch, and she heard a voice telling her not to do anything, and that it was dangerous. It was the girl who tried to calm him down. But she realized that he couldn't control himself, and was ready to attack at any moment without realizing it. But that sound she had heard earlier, she realized it was what happens when absorbing another's power. The prince began to have a reaction of rejection. Nicephora thought the energy was raging inside his body and beginning to torment him from the inside out. Absorbing another's power was punishable by death in Atlantis. It's unlikely Zion killed someone in order to take someone else's power. At that moment, the girl wondered what Kyortan had done after all. Nicephora moved closer to the boy and began to shake him, telling him to come to his senses. Suddenly she thought she could try resonating again. She touched his hands and activated the power. When she saw that the boy was getting better, she yelled for him to wake up. At that moment, Zion opened his eyes, as if he had come to his senses after a heavy sleep. He looked at the girl and asked if she was all right. When he saw that she was okay, he exhaled and said that he thought he'd gotten her hurt because of him. Nicephora asked if he knew his symptoms. Zion said that he actually has insanity, and if he loses control during his seizures and they start stopping him, he might attack. The boy thanked her for not doing anything. Nicephora now understood why there was no one around him. After all, there were servants who had died while they were trying to help him. She thought that if she could get into the secret Imperial library, she could find out what spell Kyortan had cast. Once the power is absorbed, it is passed down from generation to generation. It's definitely something forbidden. If Nicephora had been able to spot Kyortan and Doom's betrayal earlier, this guy wouldn't be in so much pain now. At this moment the wagon stopped, and the coachman came in and told them they had arrived. Zion started to lift the girl in his arms and said they should be on their way. When they came out, the girl had no way of knowing where they were, but looking more closely, Nicephora could see herself on the walls of the building. The prince said it would be very noisy inside, so she should not be frightened. Nicephora thought she was already frightened, and how dare that scoundrel Kyortan carve her face. She wondered what kind of person dared to carve the face of the Grand Empress on the door. After they entered the Emperor's room, everyone present was shocked. Someone even asked why he had come here, even with his daughter Loessian. Zion came closer to the Emperor and greeted him. Agrio, seeing him with the girl, asked what was wrong and why they were together. The prince said he had something to say. After a short silence, he announced that he had resonated with Nicephora. The people who were sitting there were shocked. They had not expected such a message. Nicephora couldn't understand why they were reacting so strongly. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the Emperor asked what condition Zion was in. His assistant replied that nothing had changed, just as with the little girl. After examining the girl, he said she was fine too. She was perfectly healthy and just as adorable. The Emperor said that this then meant that there was no change after the resonance. His assistant confirmed this. Agrio said that it then turns out that in the legends it became an offering, but they have a completely different result. At that moment Nathaniel and Gibert came into the room. They too wanted to know more. Gibert told His Majesty that even if Nicephora was a dragon princess, they should not discuss matters concerning her without her kin. He asked if a formal protest could be made against the crown prince. At that moment, the girl thought that Tanili had probably told her brother everything. They were both worried and annoyed. Suddenly, the people who were present started whispering. Even if they were from the Loessian family, I hope they wouldn't be killed here and now, in front of a child. Nicephora thought they would cause trouble and shouldn't act like this with the Emperor, so she made a cute face and reached for Nathaniel. She tried to say she was fine. At that moment, Gibert turned back to his brother and nodded. After that, the two of them bowed, and he apologized to the Emperor for his rudeness. He asked if they understood it all themselves. Gibert said they understand, but Nicephora belongs to the Loessian family, and while the crown prince reported his resonance with her, they were not in the dark. He said he felt that anything to do with Nicephora should first and foremost be known by her family, and before having these meetings, he would like to see that they are informed about it as well.